We break down your guys' dynasty decisions all the time, but it's been a while since we talked just trades. So today we're going to go for, 30 minutes, 40 minutes or so, breaking down just some of your dynasty fantasy football trades that you've, maybe made in the past couple weeks. Trades for this video came mostly from our Discord server. If you want to check that out, you can sign up on Flock Fantasy, or I asked for some on Twitter, and I'll break down which ones came from which after the intro. But before we get into it, Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. And yeah, I mean, you guys always watch us on Dynasty Decisions, but let's take it a step back. We usually talk about the roster as a whole. Let's just focus on the trades today. Like Corey said, let's break down a lot of your guys' trades and kind of contextualize whether you're a contender, whether you're a rebuilder, what type of stance your team is at, and ultimately what the valuation equates to.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun insight on kind of like market value for a lot of players. So I'm really excited to get into this one. Let us know down below if you guys like us doing just trades sometimes instead of, the whole dynasty decision shebang that we do all the time. So definitely let us know down below, but let's get right into it. All right, so we're going to start it off with Buffalo Josh, who is in the Discord there. Again, if you want access to that, Flock Fantasy is how you can get it. Link down below in the description. He gives us a trio of trades. So what I'm thinking is that we're going to grade each trade and then kind of grade the overall trade landscape if somebody submitted multiple trades to us. So the first trade that he sends to us here, it's one team. He made these trades all like around the NFL draft. I think one was before, one was around the time of the draft, and then one was after the draft. So Superflex league, 6 point for passing touchdowns, half PPR, also half point for first downs as well, which is relevant to this first trade, I would say in particular, because he received Cooper Kupp and Kenneth Gainwell in exchange for CeeDee Lamb. Now, in a regular format, CeeDee Lamb has a lot more value than Cooper Kupp, but I do think Cooper Kupp in a format that values first downs is a little bit more valuable.
Yeah, I mean, it is more valuable. However, I will say that the valuation between Cooper Kupp and CeeDee Lamb for me is probably around a 2024 mid-first, given the youth aspect that CeeDee Lamb brings. I mean, if we're talking about straight startup value, CeeDee Lamb's more of a early to mid-second round pick, whereas Cooper Kupp more of, your mid-fourth, late-fourth type of startup pick. So for me personally, I do think that you could have gotten more for CeeDee Lamb, and I probably would have asked for a mid-first at the minimum.
Yeah, or at least a better piece than Kenneth Gainwell, which, I mean, he doesn't represent a whole lot. I don't think he's going to be a huge contributing factor in that backfield. I think Swift is probably going to eat into his receiving workload. Rashad Penny will probably work on the ground. So, yeah, I agree. I think Kupp has more value in this format, but I definitely would have wanted more for CeeDee Lamb, especially knowing that, like, it's not outside the range of outcomes that Cooper Kupp just, has a bit of a fall off this year, and CeeDee Lamb outscores him in redraft, given, the age and the superstar breakout that we saw to CeeDee Lamb this past year. So I don't love that first trade. I'm going to give that a C-. I'll let you make your grade here.
Yeah, I think C- is about fair. D plus C- on that range. Obviously, you can argue if this is like a start 12, start 13 plus, maybe you want the assets, but even then, I would still want a better contributing asset than what Kenneth Gainwell represents.
Now let's move on to the next trade that Buffalo Josh made here. He receives Tyreek Hill, Baker Mayfield, and a 2024 second. It's pretty clear that he's in a competitive window. He got Cooper Kupp, he got Tyreek Hill. He's looking to win now. Trades away George Kittle and Najee Harris. At face value, I think if you're in a competitive league that's like a deeper starting roster, I think I like the versatility of having a startable, every down running back like Najee Harris and a stud tight end. But Tyreek Hill, if it's like more of a shallower league format and you're trying to get the upside of like weekly ceiling and that kind of thing, I do understand the Tyreek Hill side of this thing. So how do you kind of break this deal down?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said there. I do think in a start 8, 9, or 10, you probably take the Tyreek Hill side just because of the superstar factor. We expect this guy to be a top 3 overall wide receiver, a guy that was averaging when Tua was healthy over 22 fantasy points per game in PPR format. So definitely a big difference maker. However, I will say once you get into your deeper league formats, your start 12s, your start 13s, at that point, having that difference maker at tight end and that every down workhorse running back with Najee is valuable. So for me personally, it just depends on how many players you start. And if you wanted that superstar edge in a more shallower format, I do like the move for Tyreek side. However, if you're in a deeper format, I do like the Kittle Harris side. So I just think this is fair market value either way.
Yeah, it's a start 9 league. So it's a 2 wide receiver,
Yep.
2 flex, super flex league. He already has Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts as his top 2 quarterbacks. So
You nailed
Baker
them.
Mayfield's kind of like your QB3 in a pinch there. But he does a little bit, he is a little bit weaker now at tight end, having given up George Kittle. He has Darren Waller and Evan Ingram, who I think you could get by with, but not necessarily guys that I would want to like build my team around. Now, this next trade, he adds Bijan Robinson to help replace Najee Harris. So he trades away a 2024 first. But if you read the names, it's the guys first who had the 101. So that could be an early first next year. That's something that is definitely going to play into account here. His own first round pick, he's obviously in a competitive window. He's going to have a mid to late first at the very least. And then the 209. Apparently, he had to add the 209 because the guy who was holding Bijan Robinson got offered Justin Jefferson straight up for the pick and didn't take it. But he
Wow.
did squeeze a 209. I think maybe because he was trying to get his own first back is the reason he maybe made this deal instead of the Jefferson trade. But what are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, right off the bat, is there any way you could now parlay Bijan into Jefferson? Because if that's the case, I would like it even more. But all jokes aside, from the face value of this trade, 101 for the 2 first and the 209, I think it's about equatable. Not to mention, you said you're in a winning window. Bijan Robinson's obviously the running back 1 in Dynasty, top 3 overall running back in redraft. So for me personally, although you figure that first is probably going to be early, even if it's like the 104, you're adding arguably the 109/110 to 112 next year. And the 209 is not enough of a difference maker in a shallower starting format for me to worry about, quote unquote, overpaying. So I actually do like the Bijan side for you, given the context of your team. But I do think, again, market value wise, this is a very fair deal.
Yeah, I think either way you slice it, these last 2 trades are both like solid Bs for me. I think you could
Yep.
probably, convince yourself either side won the trade. So I think overall you got about a B minus C plus type of haul. Given that first trade, I think I would have held CD
Yep.
Lamb there, but I really don't mind the Tyreek Hill side, especially in a start 9 type of format. And again, I like going after Bijan Robinson there. But if you had held the Najee and George Kittle side, you also could have just sold that guy his first for something else potentially, because I'm sure he is motivated to get that first round pick back because he obviously traded it away and had the 101 this year. He figures that he's probably going to have a high pick again next year. So I might have tried to maneuver my way a little bit differently there, but overall, not a bad little haul there. Next, we can move on to Dr. Bryan Harris's team. He has a duo of trades for us here. Superflex 12-team PPR, James Cook, and a 2024 first. He lists that it is expected to be early to mid for Trey Lance. I think even if this was a mid to late first, I'd probably take the James Cook in the first side. I'm a little bit lower on Trey Lance. I think the risk is very high that he could potentially lose his job, could potentially be fighting for like a bridge quarterback deal this time next year. Even though the upside is somewhat tantalizing, I'm definitely lower on him. So I think just mitigating that risk, getting yourself especially if it's an early to mid 2024 first, is an easy A plus type of move for me.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, even if that was a late first, I think that would be about the valuation currently on the market for Lance, given the uncertainty, given the volatility. But the fact that it's expected early to mid, the fact that you're getting a high leverage potential handcuff slash, ambiguous backfield running back with James Cook, I think this is an A plus as well. And I'm high on Trey Lance. So getting James Cook there, getting that first round pick, not to mention that first round pick, if it does materialize into earlier mid and you're in a competitive window, that's more buying power for you in season. And more people are going to be willing to buy that 2024 first than they would Trey Lance, given the potential downside risk. What if he's, the backup at some point? What if he gets traded? That 2024 first has a lot more liquidity on the market than what Trey Lance represents.
Yeah, especially because it's not yours too. So they know
Yeah.
that when you're trading away the first, you're getting your team better, and they're not worried about that pick becoming the 112 or whatever. So you could potentially buy, a Stephon Diggs midseason, or somebody that's going to be very productive for your team. The second trade here, he gets the 103 in exchange for Drake London and Rachaad White. He did select Bryce Young with the 103, so now he has a quarterback core of Mahomes, Geno Smith, and Bryce Young. At face value, I mean, Bryce Young to me is a top 15 asset. Drake London is more of like a top 30 asset, give or take. And Rachaad White more of like a 7th round pick, 8th round pick. Even if you're higher on Rachaad White, I don't think you can get too excited about that. So going after the quarterback equity, especially knowing that you basically re-rolled Trey Lance into an early first next year and you get yourself a young quarterback to build around, I think this is like a classic example of making your team a little bit more liquid. And a little bit more of a long-term staying power. As much as Drake London's young and he's going to have a long, shelf life, Bryce Young is the young quarterback who could really appreciate and value.
Yeah, I agree with that. Basically, how I evaluated here is, like you kind of said, Bryce Young, more of that mid-second round startup value for both of us. Drake London, although we're very high on him, he's still more so a early to mid third round pick valuation for us. So if you're telling me Rachaad White, who I have about, an early to mid second round rookie pick value, If you were to tell me right now I'm in a startup and somebody was offering me a mid-third round pick and a rookie second, 2024 second for my mid-second, I would rather have that mid-second startup pick. So for me personally, just from a valuation standpoint, I would rather have Bryce Young. And given the context of your team, adding Bryce Young to the squad with Mahomes, with Geno Smith, you don't have to rely upon him as your quarterback 2 right away, but obviously long-term potential, has that upside to be a top 8, top 10 overall quarterback in superflex formats. I think this is an A move.
Yeah, exactly. I think net these two trades together and you got an A type of A plus kind of projection there. We can move on to the next trade here, which is from Angantyr, 12 team superflex half PPR. There is 4 IDP slots as well, so that'll factor in kind of these rookie picks a little bit. You guys know I love J.K. Dobbins, so this one's going to be tough for me. He receives the 108, which obviously he spent on Quentin Johnson, and then he gets a 2024 fourth as well, but that pick may be a little bit more like a late third because there's IDP slots and because it's a deeper scoring format and superflex and that kind of thing. And then he gives away the 210 and a 2024 third in addition to J.K. Dobbins. So what are your thoughts on this trade? I love J.K. Dobbins. I think he's probably valued, like I would rather have Quentin Johnson over J.K. Dobbins, but if you told me Zay Flowers versus J.K. Dobbins, 2 players on the same team who I value at 109, I think that's probably about his market value in my opinion.
Yeah, on face value here, I want the Quentin Johnson side. However, obviously you mentioned there's IDP dynamics. I'm not exactly sure what the texture would look like from an ADP standpoint, what the 210, what the third would look like. But from what I know, I would rather have the 108. I'd rather have Quentin Johnson over J.K. Dobbins. And realistically, the 210 and the third isn't enough for me to bridge the gap between them.
210 was Hendon Hooker, he said into the chat. So Hendon Hooker, I don't think he should go that high. So the fact that he spent it on the Hendon Hooker, that pick there, that's definitely a good bonus for you. So overall, I think grading this trade, I think this is like a solid B plus, A minus. I think you probably won this trade, even though I love J.K. Dobbins, and you kind of mitigated some risk there with the young running back who's never really, commanded a full workload. And we have some concerns about the offensive situation, pass catching, and that kind of thing. So we're going to move over to the Twitter questions. Now, I farmed this out to Twitter yesterday. I was like, hey, anybody make a recent Dynasty trade, send it here in the chat or in the replies. And Analytics of Dynasty, McNamara Dynasty here, responded with one that I think is really interesting because I'm almost exactly valuing Amon-Ra St. Brown at this exact market value. So he trades for, I think, Amon-Ra St. Brown with the 106 and the 110. The 106 in my rankings is either Jahmyr Gibbs or JSN, but most often Jahmyr Gibbs is off the board. Maybe you even have a CJ Stroud fall to that point, but most of the time that's going to be Jackson Smith and Jigba. The 110, probably a combination of Dalton Kincaid, Zay Flowers, maybe Will Levis, somebody like that. What are your thoughts on this trade?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if like Stroud fell, like there would be different circumstances here. But assuming the 106 is JSN, the 110 in my rankings, I believe right now is Will Levis. So for equating it about JSN and Will Levis in exchange for Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think this is your prototypical fair deal. If you're contending, you buy the points for Amon-Ra St. Brown, you buy the potential top 5 overall season, potential 160 plus targets in that Lions offense. And if you're not competing, you shed some of that production off of your team and you get 2 liquid assets with JSN and with the 110, which I'm assuming was probably either Will Levis or maybe Zay Flowers or somebody like that. So I do think that this is a fair value deal both ways. I'd probably grade it as a B because I've seen Amon-Ra St. Brown go cheaper in some circumstances. However, given the context, if you're trying to compete, I have no problem paying this price.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect deal if you're trying to compete. Like you said, the 106, if that ends up being CJ Stroud and the 110 ends up being Zay Flowers, it's probably a little bit of a different deal, or maybe Dalton Kincaid falls to that point in time. But at face value, the way we have it ranked, I think that's 2 mid to late first is exactly in our trade value chart on Flock Fantasy. If you guys want to check that out, that's exactly how I have Amon-Ra St. Brown ranked. It's 2 mid to late first is how I have his value. So definitely a pretty solid trade there. Ryan at Why Do I Even Try FF, who's in a league with Danny, I believe, 10-team Superflex PPR tight end premium trade. He posted a poll on Twitter, I guess, when he made this trade, and he said he got rinsed in the comments. Basically, the poll heavily favored the other team. He gets Kyler Murray, the 205, which became Michael Mayer, and a 2024 third. Again, it is a tight end premium league. And then he gives away the 103, which became Bryce Young, and the 301, which became Sam Laporta, Rashad Bateman, and Trey Lance. So what are your thoughts on this trade and kind of how do you grade it out?
So the way I break this down is the 205 and the 24 third more or less for me equals Bateman in the 301. Reason being Mayer and Bateman, I would prefer Mayer, but however, I would prefer the 301 over the random 2024 third. So if you put those together, they're pretty much equivalent value. So the meat and potatoes of this deal ends up coming down to Kyler for the 103 and Trey Lance. This is close for me. I would say the 103 is obviously either Bryce Young or Anthony Richardson. It depends. If you want that solidified stud quarterback, I don't mind paying for Kyler. However, I do think given the current market dynamics of where Anthony Richardson and Bryce Young go, I think it could have been done for a little bit cheaper. So while I disagree with Twitter that the poll heavily favored the other side, I do think I would slightly prefer the Lance and the 103 side, simply because I do think it has more buying power in the current market.
Yeah, I think it is interesting to note that it is a 10-team superflex. So quarterbacks in general will probably have it's a little easier to get one. They're a little bit less market value because there's two less teams than a standard 12-team league. So Kyler Murray, as a result of that, would probably have a little bit more value in terms of what you'd have to pay for him. I think I do favor the other side slightly, even though I'm lower on Lance. It gives you two, upside swings for elite quarterback potential with the 103 and being Bryce Young and Trey Lance there as well. I think this is like a C+. I don't think it's like you got woodshedded. I think I slightly prefer the other side, but I do think this trade could work out heavily for you because I love Michael Mayer as well. In a tight end premium format, he could definitely become a stable asset for sure.
Agreed. Like, this is the type of deal that I personally wouldn't mind paying for Kyler, but given the macro market of Kyler right now, based on the valuation of people on Twitter, valuation of people in leagues I've been in, I do think that the gap between Bryce and Kyler, I've seen people straight up prefer Bryce. So for me personally, although I personally would be willing to pay this, I do think you can get it cheaper.
Yeah, I think if you shaved Bateman off this deal, it would be like dead even.
Yeah.
Is the way I kind of look at this. So yeah, not a bad trade. You definitely didn't deserve to get, dragged in the comment section, but I definitely understand it. So moving on to the next trade here, we have from Bobby C, 12-man super flex league. Pretty simple, just a 1-for-1 Marquise Brown for the 202 in a PPR tight end premium. So in a tight end premium format, definitely Michael Mayer comes into play there. Definitely Sam Laporta comes into play there. Obviously Kincaid probably be off the board at that point in time. What are your thoughts on this trade? I prefer Marquise Brown most likely to anybody that you're going to get at the 202. Sans maybe Michael Mayer if he's there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I would personally take the Marquise Brown side, especially assuming if you're making this move, you're probably competing. Obviously, Marquise Brown dealt with his fair share of injuries last year and isn't in the most ideal situation. But anytime he's been healthy in these last couple of years, he's been demanding targets. He was a guy who was on a wide receiver 5 overall pace prior to getting hurt this past year. So you're basically buying low here, 202, unless it's like Michael Mayer, like you kind of said. Maybe it's, I don't know, Charbonnet at worst too, or like Josh Downs or something like that. Like I think I personally would just take Marquise Brown, especially when you're competing.
Yeah, I would prefer the following players to Marquise Brown. At the tail end of the first round, Zay Flowers, Will Levis, Zach Charbonnet, Dalton Kincaid, and Michael Mayer. I think I would prefer Marquise Brown straight up to Devon Achane, Josh Downs, Roschon Johnson, Kendra Miller, and anybody after that.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that.
Okay, so let's move on to the what's your grade on that one? I think that's just a solid B+ type of trade for me.
B+ makes sense.
Yep. Okay, so Nathan GN's team here, his trade, Superflex 12-team league. He acquires your boy. No, does he not acquire your boy? He trades away your boy, Dak Prescott, in exchange for a 2024 first, a 2025 first from the same team, and Jacoby Brissett. So it looks like this is a contender buying a quarterback in a super flex league. I would assume that those picks are mid to late. Otherwise, he's probably not trading for Dak Prescott, who's 30 years old. So 2 mid to late first in 2024 and 2025. Do you think that's enough? Because Brissett's not really worth a whole lot. Do you think that's enough for Dak Prescott?
I probably would have wanted a better piece than Brissett, even if it's like a young potential upside wide receiver. Yeah, Howell, someone like that. Maybe a second round pick. For me personally, I think you could have gotten a little bit more. But again, we've talked about it all the time. When you are tearing the team down, when you're trying to rebuild, sometimes you're just kind of at the mercy of what's going on. And for your sake personally, if it's in your best interest to rid Dak Prescott's points, to get rid of the 30-year-old quarterback, I don't think taking first-round picks or 2 first-round picks is a bad move. However, like I kind of said, I do think in most markets, Dak Prescott more of like a mid-second round type of startup pick. I think you could probably gotten a little bit more, assuming those picks are mid to late. But if either of those picks find their way into the 104, 105, 106, I do think there's a path to you to winning this deal.
Yeah, hopefully that 2025 pick, this guy's going all in this year. He's got a bunch of aging running backs or something like that. And then maybe by 2025, he's like, oh, I'm losing a bunch of players and maybe I have to tear it down, and you have his first. So that definitely could be a path where you win that trade. I think probably about a C plus B minus type of trade, because like Danny said, I think it is probably a second round or too short, or maybe a better piece than Brissett too short, but give or take a pretty decent deal.
Agree with you there.
Yeah. So Dankah has got two trades for us here. He has listed this offer was brought to him for Jordan Love in a 12-team, 4-point per passing touchdown super flex. He said he auto accepted this because I guess people like Jordan Love a lot. This is insane. I mean, we could just flat out say this is an A+ deal. How do you value Jordan Love right now? Is the 109 versus Jordan Love a fair compensation, or the 109 and the 211 maybe?
Yeah, I would say the 109 for me. I think Zay Flowers and him are about equatable in my startup rankings. And even if you're extremely high on Jordan Love, let's just say the 211 side. So if we're doing the math there and you're profiting a free 2025 first round pick, this is what we call money moves. This is what we call sharpening the iron bank, building those assets, and giving yourself more buying power when you are ready to compete. So for me personally, I don't view Jordan Love as this strong contending piece that is going to actually impact that guy's first round pick. I don't even know if it's the same guy's first round pick that you acquired. I do see that the D was left into that blue smudge, so I'm assuming it's probably his first. And if that's the case, I mean, Jordan Love, we don't even know if he's going to be starting by 2024. We don't even know if he's going to be a fantasy relevant quarterback by 2024. Maybe he's, a consistent quarterback too at that point. But realistically, it's not like this difference making type of quarterback that's going to make that pick from the 107 to the 110. There's a possibility where that 2025 first round pick could be potentially the 105, the 106. And at that point, that's free profit.
Yeah, I have Jordan Love in the mid to late 50s of my startup rankings, and I have Zay Flowers in the mid to late 60s of my startup rankings. So it's not a huge difference, 109 straight up for Jordan Love, and let alone if Addison or QJ or somebody else, Kincaid, if you're super high on him, fell there. I think, like you said, you kind of pocket a free 2025 first out of this trade. So to me, this is an A+ deal. Definitely a smart move. He also made another pretty much A+ move. This is probably the biggest woodshed of this entire video so far. Getting Kyler Murray in the same league scoring format, 12-team super flex, 4-point per passing touchdown, to pair now with Justin Herbert, who he has as his starting quarterback. 112 and 211, not even close to enough for Kyler Murray. This is probably at least a mid-first in 2024 short, if not probably 2 first short.
Is this the same league?
It is, at least the same scoring format. I'm not sure if it's the exact same league, but it is the same scoring format.
So you mean to tell me in the aggregate of these moves, you basically pocketed the 112 to 109 upgrade and a free 2025 first to move from Jordan Love to Kyler Murray. Am I reading this right?
Yeah, I guess so, because, I mean, he used the 211 to trade for Kyler Murray in the trade. So, yeah, he basically, his league market values Jordan Love higher than Kyler Murray, by the sounds of it.
Significantly, by like a first and a three pick swap.
Yeah, so ridiculous. I mean, Kyler Murray, if I had to label who's the biggest quarterback buy in Dynasty right now, it's easily Kyler Murray and Deshaun Watson. So these are easy moves. If you can get Kyler Murray for anything less than 2 mid-firsts, if not more than that, 2 mid-firsts and a second probably is how I kind of value Kyler Murray. Like, you need to be absolutely smashing some trades out for Kyler if that's his going rate in your league. So let's move on to David's team, which is an 8-teamer. So 8-team, 1 quarterback, 3 wide receiver, 2 flex. So very positional heavy in this type of format. He desperately needed elite potential wide receiver talent and wanted to secure JSN. So he trades away Gabe Davis, 201 and 104, which presumably is like Addison or QJ or somebody like that. And he gets Brandon Ayuk and the 102. So for me, I mean, Brandon Ayuk is more valuable than Gabe Davis in the 201 in a 1 quarterback league, in my opinion. So you just basically profit up to the 102 for free.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I would want the Brandon Ayuk and 102 side pretty significantly, and I think it's a pretty easy A+, because not to mention, like you kind of said, 8-team league. I'm assuming, well, actually, we can see right now 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 3 more shallow starting lineups, and you're just getting the by far best player in the deal, in my opinion. And arguably, although I would prefer Jordan Addison and Quentin Johnson, I don't think Brandon Ayuk is too far behind. I would probably equate his value more so as like the 105, 106 area. So if you're doing the math there, 102 and 106 for the 104, 201, and Gabe Davis was probably in early to mid second. Like you took this guy to the woodshed.
Yeah, I have Ayuk higher than Quentin Johnson. So for me, he's
Yeah.
worth the 104
Well,
if
yeah.
Addison's off the board. But I guess, with
Market value,
Gibbs
yeah.
thrown into the mix there, it's probably Addison is the best available player there at 104. So definitely an A+ deal. Spicy hot. Not his trade, but his dad's trade he sends in here. It's a 10-team superflex PPR. His team is very competitive. He kind of just needed a quarterback. He had, I think it was Mahomes as his starting quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo and Sam Howell as his like quarterback core, but his like running backs are loaded, wide receivers loaded, tight ends loaded, depth loaded. In your situation, this is not the quarterback I would have traded for, but I think at face value, this is a fine move because it is his first and second, so it's going to be a late pick. And you get CJ Stroud, who's an early third round, mid third round startup pick at the latest for a 2024 first that's projected to be mid to late and a 2024 second that's projected to be mid to late. We're talking like sixth round startup value, fifth, sixth round startup value, and then like eighth, ninth round startup value at the best case scenario. So for me, I would have traded for a different quarterback. I would have gone after, Dak Prescott or somebody like that, somebody that can help you win right away. Because his team has like Eckler and Barkley and some of these like aging running backs. So for me, I just wouldn't have traded for Stroud because he doesn't totally help you year one of your competitive window. But I do like the move regardless.
Yeah, from a base value standpoint, the Stroud for us in a super flex is our 104 personally. So if we're doing the math there, 104 for 2024 picks, I'm assuming are going to be late. Like you kind of said, he's in a competitive window. He's got his team pretty much set up. A 2024 late first, a 2024 late second for the 104. Just give me the 104 on face value. So give me Stroud here. Like you kind of said, I probably would have went for a Dak Prescott type, even a Kyler Murray type. I know so many people are so worried. Oh, Kyler Murray is going to miss the season. He's going to miss, 8 weeks. I think it's more likely that he's back week 1 to 3 than he is, week 10. So for me personally, I think he might actually be one of the better buys regardless of contending window. Like I think if you're a contender, you can buy him and hope by week 4, week 5, your team's already scoring points and then you just insert Kyler Murray into your lineup. So I would kind of scrounge around, see what the cost is of Dak Prescott, see what the cost is of Kyler Murray because like we've seen in some of these deals, Kyler Murray's valuation right now is all over the map.
Yeah, I think you with Jimmy Garoppolo and Sam Howell, you can get by at your quarterback 2 slot until Murray gets back. Even if it's week 7 by the time he comes back, I think you're still probably okay there with the rest of his team the way he showed it. So I think that's probably like an A- move. I think I would have gone after a different quarterback, but at face value, I think it's a good trade. We can move on to Tom's deal here, which is a 10-team super flex. He gets Garrett Wilson, the 210, the 310, and the 406. He gives away Jordan Love again. Jordan Love trade. He gives up the 108, a 2024 first. It is his first rounder, and he says he's competing in a 10-team superflex, and the 402. So it's a 10-teamer. Even if you're competing, that's 107 to 110, give or take. And you give up the 108, which is like Quentin Johnston and Jordan Love for basically Garrett Wilson and a bunch of like mid-round picks.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably fair. However, I will say if you are competing, I probably would have gone for a cheaper, more win now wide receiver. As much as I like Garrett Wilson, like I would have gone after, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, because I do think that you could have probably shaven at least probably the first, and maybe even Jordan Love off the deal if you added like a second round pick to it. So personally for me, I think there's more cost effective options. However, given the fact that you made the move, given the fact that Garrett Wilson is still, in my opinion, a late to mid second round type of startup pick, I would say this is probably about a B for me, just because I do think you probably had better alternative options for cost.
Yeah, I think you probably could have sold Jordan Love potentially straight for like Calvin Ridley. And if you're in that situation, I probably would have just rather done that or use your first to go after somebody like that as well.
Agreed.
Garrett Wilson, as much as I love Garrett Wilson, he is very expensive to acquire in trades, and you guys can see it here. So I would say probably like a B minus. Is that where you're kind of at with this type of trade? You're never going to go wrong really acquiring elite assets, especially in a 10-team league when you're trying to get the best starting lineup out there possible. Jordan Love also has a little bit less value in that type of format because superflex quarterbacks are less scarce in that format as well. So I'd say about like a B minus B, give or take, for me.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you there.
Yeah. So Daniel sends us 2 trades here. He sends us another Kyler Murray trade. He's going on the thumbnail of this video. Kyler Murray was acquired for Trey Lance, a 3rd round pick in 2024, a 3rd round pick in 2025, and a 3rd round pick in 2026.
A+.
Trey Lance has way more downside risk than Kyler Murray, in my opinion. He has not shown at all to be an elite fantasy quarterback. We got like 2 games of Trey Lance scoring over 20 points per game in fantasy. We have like 3 of the last 3 seasons where Kyler Murray has been a top 5 fantasy quarterback anytime he's been on the field.
I love Trey Lance, but this is probably about a mid first off at the minimum. Like I genuinely feel that because Kyler Murray, like you kind of said, is the most disrespected difference making quarterback in the entire dynasty landscape. I mean, this is the most disrespectful deal I've ever seen, to be honest.
Yeah, I wouldn't even accept Trey Lance on a mid first for Kyler Murray. If I had Kyler Murray, I wouldn't even accept that deal. I would want more than that if I
Yeah,
was the Kyler manager. So yeah, A+ move there. Definitely get yourself a difference making quarterback. Not quite an A+ move on the second one.
agreed.
Saquon Barkley is definitely a difference making running back. You shave off some age production by losing Austin Eckler. I think Saquon's probably got like 1 to 2 years left, maybe 2 to 3 at the very most. Austin Eckler probably like a 1-year rental, maybe 2 years you get out of him after that as like a flex play or whatever. But I think as far as RB1 production is concerned, I broke it down in the running back age and touch Apex video. People often think that they're going to get way more years out of their aging running backs than they think. And I think Eckler might be just a 1-year guy. After he's a UFA this year, probably not going to re-sign with the Chargers. They're probably not going to want to pay him or whatever the case is. So not a huge fan of this move, if I'm being honest, because you have James Cook's a fine ambiguous upside piece. 109, you're still probably going to get maybe Quentin Johnson, Jordan Addison, Dalton Kincaid, worst case scenario, Zay Flowers at that point in time. I think Barkley and Eckler are closer in value than this trade would indicate.
Yeah, I agree. You're buying either of these running backs with the intention that they're going to be 1 to 2 year type of guys. Maybe Barkley, of course, you're hoping for the 3rd year, but like Corey kind of said, people automatically assume that a running back's going to last longer, and then they end up materializing into prime example this past year, Dalvin Cook. The year prior, Ezekiel Elliott. We see it every single year that a guy that we think has 3 years left, like you kind of said, only has 1 or 2. So for me personally, buying into Barkley because he's 2 years younger, he projects to play quote unquote longer for a more stable asset, sure. But giving up a first round type of wide receiver, whether it's Quentin Johnson, whether it's Zay Flowers and James Cook, who could potentially by this time next year vault himself into maybe the RB2 conversation if he gets the opportunity with Buffalo. If you were trading Austin Eckler, I would look for a different type of package than going for Saquon Barkley, given the cost of it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's probably about an accurate assessment there. I think the way I would grade this trade is probably like a C-, but you got an A+ so far and away on the first deal that you do kind of make up for it. So I'd say they kind of net together as like an A-.
I mean, it's probably an aggregate A+ still because of how ludicrous the Kyler one was.
Yeah, legitimately, definitely could be that type of deal. So yeah, pretty solid moves overall. Taco Tuesday, the next team we're going to talk about here. We'll probably tackle like 2 more of these after this one. He says he's the top team. He has 6 firsts and 3 seconds in 2025. So just a couple years from my house money season. He trades away Roschon Johnson, Jerry Jeudy, and Travis Etienne. He receives Damian Harris, James Cook, Anthony Richardson, and a 2026 second rounder. So Anthony Richardson, is he worth the entire package by himself?
I would easily take Anthony Richardson. And in fact, like you could probably throw every other piece of the package on the other side. And I would take Anthony Richardson, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, the Bills' backfield in the second is probably like at the very least that cancels out Roschon and like half of Jerry Jeudy, let alone, Anthony Richardson is, a top 15 startup pick, not just in our opinion on the market. And I've seen him go in the first round of a lot of startups out there. So you're talking about like a borderline first round startup pick for as much as I like Jerry Jeudy, as much as I like Travis Etienne, like what are they, 4th, 5th round startup picks at the very best case scenario? Roschon Johnson, an 8th round startup pick at the best case scenario.
Realistically, if you were to say this package was Anthony Richardson for Harris, Cook, the second, Roschon, Jeudy, and Etienne, which side are you taking?
In a shallow league, I would probably take Anthony Richardson still.
So the fact that you got 3 of those pieces on your side, it's an A++++.
Yeah, definitely a great move. Even if Richardson doesn't have the greatest rookie season, he's still going to have more liquidity than the other guys. You're going to have a 25-year-old running back on Jacksonville, probably in a split backfield. Jerry Jeudy, if he doesn't do it this year, will lose quite a bit of value because he's a guy that people are already split on the market. Some people don't think he's very good. Some people do. So he's definitely a guy that could go either way. But we can probably move on. I think this is probably an A+ for me as well. Yep. Bailey's trade here, and then we'll get to the last one of the video after him. 16-team Superflex PPR. Again, the Kyler Murray show apparently is this video. He got Kyler paired with Lamar Jackson now in a 16-team Superflex league. You are not going to find very many teams with Lamar and Kyler on the team. You get Lamar and Kyler in a second for Devontae Smith, who's a great option, but not as good as Kyler, Mac Jones, and James Conner, who are not that valuable.
A plus. Like this would be an A plus in a 12-team superflex league, a 16-team superflex league. And you mean to tell me that there's an opportunity this year for you to roll out 45, 50, 55 potential combined points from your quarterback position? Like, it's ludicrous. It's ludicrous. The advantage that you now have at quarterback to the rest of your league is so vast that, quite frankly, you could have a mid roster elsewhere and still be in competitive window and still potentially be a top 3 overall team, because that's how much of a difference making difference making duo you have at quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. So no need to spend too much time on that trade. Great job there. Bailey, Jaylos team, 12-team, Superflex, start 9, half-point PPR. So a bit of a shallower format. He said he loves Treylon Burks, but in a start 9, he saw the opportunity to go all in and upgrade his quarterback and wide receiver position. So going all in often gets you in trouble sometimes. I will warn people of that. But Kyler Murray, again, making an appearance in this video. Kyler Murray for 2 first-round picks, Treylon Burks, Trey Lance. You also get Stephon Diggs on the side of this. So how do you kind of break this deal down? I think at face value, to me, this looks relatively fair.
It does, because I was trying to equate it, and it's like, it's not Burks in a first, but at the same time, or for Diggs, but at the same time, it's obviously not Burks straight up for Diggs. It's probably somewhere in between, and the same type of thing with Kyler Murray and Trey Lance. I personally would prefer Kyler Murray to Trey Lance in a first straight up, and there's a little bit of a difference there. So if you're kind of combining them together, like you said, I think it's a fair deal. Not to mention, assuming that obviously you're in a competitive window, you're going all in. One of those firsts is probably guaranteed to be in the 109 to 112 area. I really, really like this move. You are upgrading your wide receiver point production tremendously. Obviously, Burks could have this breakout year, but Stephon Diggs is a top 5 overall wide receiver in redraft. Stephon Diggs is a mid-first round pick in redraft. So if you are competing, getting that advantage from a potential 15, 16 PPR point per game perspective, which is what we think the bull case is for Burks, to potentially a 20, 21, 22 PPR point per game wide receiver in Diggs. Love that move. And not to mention, you're getting off the risk, the volatility of Trey Lance, paying a couple first of premium price. Like, I think it's a fine deal in Ben's position here, being able to get rid of these win now assets. But at the same time, from your perspective, you're getting these win now assets. You're positioning yourself to potentially win the championship. And like I said, one of those is already guaranteed to be late. I don't know where the other one lands, but assuming, let's just say hypothetically, it's a mid first, I'm fine with paying the price here.
Yeah, I think the easy way for me to break this down was Kyler for the 2 ones and Diggs for Burks and Lance. Now, I'd prefer the Burks and Lance side on the Diggs trade, but I prefer the Kyler Murray side on the other side of it.
Agreed.
So it's kind of a balanced trade. I think this is like a classic B plus type of move.
Yep.
You get what you needed. I'm assuming the person who made this trade was a rebuilder. They get what they needed: a young quarterback, young receiver, 2 first-round picks. I'd be happy with this on either side.
Yep. No, I agree there. This is one of like my favorite deals, where each side kind of gets what they want. Each side kind of furthers their goal of your goal potentially being competing, and Ben's goal obviously getting these first round picks and potentially retooling. This is just what I love seeing, deals that just materialize for both sides like this.
Yeah, for sure. So we can move on to the next trade. We have trades from El Jeff or El Jefe. I'm not exactly sure what his name is. He has 2 trades listed here. This will probably be the last 2 of the video. 10-team Superflex PPR, year 2 of a productive struggle. He trades for Mike Evans using Rashad Bateman. Now, he said he's in year 2 of a productive struggle. I don't know if that means he's trying to transition into a contender, or if that means he's still going to continue to rebuild and thinks that Mike Evans is just undervalued, which I think in either case, it's a pretty good profit. We know Mike Evans is a good receiver. We know come the regular season, he's going to be more valuable than Rashad Bateman, at least in my opinion. I still think Rashad Bateman has some upside, but I'm not convinced that he's going to be, this great young wide receiver that accumulates a ton in value. So for me, going after a guy that's a proven commodity, whether you intend to use him for a competitive window or not, is usually not a bad idea, because we could get to week 5, week 6 of the season, and if you're not using him, you can always shop him off potentially for 2 second-round picks or whatever the case is. And Rashad Bateman, his downside risk is that if he doesn't perform right away, he might be Terrace Marshall territory of dynasty rankings this time mid-season or at the end of the year.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I don't mind making this move. Again, like you kind of said, I don't know if year 2 of productive struggle means you're starting to try to get the team together to potentially be in house money. But yeah, it hurts losing the youth. But I do think Mike Evans right now has a higher market value. And Mike Evans come in season, if he shows to be the Mike Evans that's put up 1,000 yards the last, 8, 9 years, and you could potentially transition him into an early second at that point. Yeah, no, I think this is fair.
Yeah, for sure. So the other trade that he makes here is a 12-team Superflex tight end premium. So different league by the looks of it. Already had a quarterback room of Hurts, Kyler, Drake May, so I'm guessing it's a Devy league as well, and Aaron Rodgers. So you have two absolute superstars with Hurts and Kyler. You have one soon-to-be superstar coming into the NFL with Drake May, and Aaron Rodgers, a guy who can fill in for Kyler Murray while he's on the mend. This is like a perfectly built quarterback core, in my opinion, because once Rodgers is gone, May steps in. Once Kyler is back, they're your two starting quarterbacks. Definitely a great situation to be in. And it looks like you're loading up on that Philadelphia Eagles stack because you acquired Dallas Goedert and A.J. Brown to go along with Jalen Hurts and Hendon Hooker, who's kind of just like a throw-in this deal. I think him and Jelani Woods just kind of cancel each other out. Neither of them are worth a ton in my opinion, but I would actually say Hooker's probably worth a little bit more given that he plays quarterback. Essentially, it's A.J. Brown for Anthony Richardson and Dallas Goedert for Treylon Burks. That's the way I kind of break this thing down. A.J. Brown and Anthony Richardson are very close in my rankings. Let me actually look how far away I have them. And Dallas Goedert and Treylon Burks are very close in my rankings, especially in tight end premium.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I would say it always hurts me to make moves like this because I'm so worried about Anthony Richardson this time next year potentially being a top 8 overall quarterback. But because your quarterbacks already Hurts, Kyler, Drake, and Aaron Rodgers, I'm assuming you're probably competing with that type of quarterback core. And if that's the case, you get the Philadelphia Eagles stack there. Obviously, the double stack with A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert paired with Jalen Hurts. A.J. Brown is still a 26-year-old wide receiver. We expect to be a top 5 overall guy this year. Late first-round pick according to Underdog Fantasy ADP. And Dallas Goedert is one of the, top 6 overall type of tight ends. So for me personally, I do like the frame here and the thought process of getting those two difference-making type of assets to try to compete. But I do think that from the other guy's side, he probably likes his side of the deal too, and I do as well. So for me personally, I think this is the type of deal where, like the last team, you're kind of just happy with either side you got. If you're competing, you obviously want the Brown, Goddard, Hooker side. If you're not competing, getting the youth, getting the potential upside of Anthony Richardson and his perspective and Treylon Burks, I do think, like I said, is a fair deal.
Yeah, exactly. I've got it 7 spots lower than Treylon Burks. Again, it is tight end premium, so in a tight end premium, probably be exactly ranked the same. And then I have A.J. Brown 2 spots higher than Anthony Richardson. So they're both very similar assets. I think, like Danny said, this is probably a win-win for both teams, probably a solid B down the middle. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you guys enjoyed it, leave a like. If you're new around here, if this is the first time you're checking us out, hit the subscribe button. I promise you, you will not regret that. We got everything covered from Dynasty, redraft coming up very soon. I'm sure a lot of you guys are getting excited for the NFL season. We have the kind of like long, dark period of the NFL coming up where everybody's on vacation and, we don't really have a lot of news and a lot of action until, late July when training camps and preseason kind of starts to get going. But we'll still have you covered for content over here. Dynasty trades, dynasty decisions, redraft stuff, best ball stuff, whatever you need, we will have you covered. And again, if you want access to our dynasty rankings, if you want access to our dynasty trade charts, which we talked about a lot in this video, a number of other things going on the site. I'm going to be breaking down my top 5 positional rankings for the 2024 class. I'm going to be breaking down some film on those players. I farmed that out to the Discord and you guys really liked that idea. Then check us out over on Flock Fantasy. Use the promo code FSE for 30% off any of the subscriptions. And if you sign up annually right now, you can get a free Zoom consultation with either myself or Danny, whichever one you prefer. And definitely check that out. That'll be linked down below in the description. Check out all of our sponsors if you want to support us in that way as well. Underdog Fantasy, Aura, Elite Picks, all that stuff linked down below in the description. So with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.